Welcome to a new video, everyone. This is episode 31 of the Sprue, and in this one we'll be looking at a very popular topic amongst scale modelers, namely adding mud and dust. You recall in the previous video we added some details to the exterior, the paint job, as well as some scratches, some stenciled on decals. We're now taking it one step further. First, I need to apologize for the length of this video. I try to keep these things short. I know myself, when I go on YouTube, I just want to see the technique. I'm not interested in the person's life story. However, we will be dealing with quite a lot of things in this video, and therefore it's a bit longer than than the usual video. First, we'll be looking at doing a pin wash, and I'll be showing you a technique of doing it without applying a varnish. Yes, indeed. Next, I'll be creating some dried mud texture. I'll show you how to do that. I'll be creating some streaking effects with oil paints. Next, we'll be doing dried and wet mud splatter effects. That'll be fun. I'll be fitting the wheels and the tracks, and I'll also be weathering them with some mud and dust, similar to the hull of the M113. And then finally, I'll be creating some dust effects just to round everything off. Guys, just a side note, you might notice some continuity issues in this video. When I applied all the different weathering techniques to this model, I jumped back and forth. And just for the video's sake, I grouped the different techniques together just so the video makes sense. So just keep that in mind. So let's get started. First thing to do is to add a pin wash just to bring out some of the recessed detail. And for this, I'll be using this filter from MIG Productions. This is, of course, an enamel product, which means it can be thinned with enamel thinner. Now, you might be thinking, what the hell is this guy doing? He's applying a pin wash to a surface that has not been covered in a gloss varnish. That is true. However, I've discovered that this particular filter works extremely well for this application. And once the odorless thinner has evaporated, that's the oily spots you'll see there, only the filter remains behind. So just continue adding this to all the detail, and allow gravity to let the filter flow into all the detail. We'll get back to this in a while. In the meantime, some more detail work. You'll notice in this picture at the bottom of your screen by the arrow, there's some worn metal there, and that is exactly the effect that we'll be creating. First, I start by using the sponge technique to add some Vallejo Sky Type S, the interior color, to the inside of the engine compartment there, just to make the paintwork look worn and scratched up there. There we go, Sky Type S, the interior color. You can immediately see the effect. There's the result. But I also want to add some metallic to this. For this, I'll be using natural steel, and this is dry brushed onto the edge of the engine compartment. I also need to apply the same to the engine hatch cover, right on the edge there where the metal will be worn. And there we go, that's the result. Certainly very convincing. I'm very happy with that. Next, I need to add some mud splatter. Now, before I do this, I'll need to coat the suspension arms of the road wheels with liquid mask. We'll be applying a lot of muddy sort of texture stuff, and I still want the wheels to fit once I've done all this stuff, and therefore I'll be coating all these little attachment points with liquid mask. This, of course, will be removed later on. So to get started, I'm going to use Vietnam Earth and this splatter effect wet ground from AK. Now this is done purely just to get some muddy texture onto the hull section where the road wheels are going to be. So first I apply some of the splatter effect. Of course, this is acrylic, and next just add some Vietnam Earth pigment. Get it more or less in the same color. course, this being an acrylic product, this is soluble in water. I can thin this with water. I'll be using this stippling brush, available at any art store. And I now just use the brush and start scooping this stuff into this area of the hole. There you see the effect, just to get some texture in there. Of course, later we'll be enhancing this a little bit more. Now you'll remember earlier we applied the MIG filter as a pin wash, and there you can see the results. Once the odorless thinner evaporated, we have this very nice pin wash effect, and of course this was done without a varnish coat first. Next I'm going to move on to streaking effects. Now if you look at this reference picture, you'll see those dirt lines, the streaky lines on the side of that 113, and this I'll be doing with oil paints, in this case from Uptailing 502. I'll be using 3 of these colors from the vehicle weathering set. The first color being light mud from Uptailing. We'll also be using dark mud, and then finally earth. These are oil paints, and according to the manufacturer, they've been formulated for scale modeling. Of course, I'll also be using their thinner. This is the first time I'll be using my my Redgrass Games glass palette insert with these oil paints, and it works really well. I think, like most of you, I used cardboard in the past, and I was really surprised at how easy it is to use oil paints on this glass insert. This is a very well-known technique in scale modeling, doing this sort of streaking with oil paint. First apply a few colored dots to the side of the surface, and next I'll take a broad brush, this is called a filbert, and moisten it with some odorless thinner. And now I just start spreading the oil paint in downwards brush stroke motions across the side of that surface there. And of course nothing blends like oil paint, and that is exactly why it is used for this application. You can see if I keep this going for a while, this is the effect that I'm getting, very realistic, exactly what I was looking for. In this case I found myself going back and forth later on, also reapplying some of the streaking. This is also done on some of the loose components. In this case I just want to get that sort of a tan, dusty color on the center of this hatch cover. Of course using circular motion. This is the result once the odorless thinner has evaporated. Very nice streaky effect on the side of the 113. And with this done, I can now get back to applying mud to the underside of this vehicle. Now in my reference pictures, I can see there's different shades of mud. There's dried mud, light mud, and that's something I'll be applying next. I'll be using Kursk soil from Ammo MIG from the Nature Effects series, and also be using Vietnam Earth pigment. Just to thin things a little bit, I'll be using odorless thinner, keeping that on standby. My stippling brush, the one I used earlier, and also some of these sticks just to mix things. I start by placing some of the pigment into my paint tray. Next I apply a few drops of Kursk soil. This of course is an enamel product, which means it can be thinned with odorless thinner. Mix this together. Here we go, nice muddy color. However, I still need some texture, and that's why I'm using this scatter material. Unfortunately, I don't know who manufactures this. I've had it for ages, and it's now found a new home inside this jar. It used to be in a bag, and I add some of this to the mixture, mix up some mud. I suspect this is sawdust that's been colored. I now use my airbrush and apply this to the side of the vehicle in the fashion there that I'm showing you. Next I want to apply some dried muddy splatter to the side of the vehicle, And I'm going to be using a lighter color, so I need to cover up the muddy section there. First I place some on a fine brush, and again use my airbrush. It's good to first practice this on just some kitchen paper or any other paper, just to make sure that you know what the behavior of this is going to be when you apply to the model. Remember guys, when it comes to weathering, there is no undo button, so be careful. Little puffs of air from the airbrush. Whoops, almost got away from me there. Just continue adding this to the side in a random pattern. That's the result. Done with Kursk soil. Next we need to get some texture into this, some fresher mud, and for this I'm going to combine Kursk soil with Vietnam earth pigment and again some of the scat material we used earlier. This will be mixed into a tray. Start with the Kursk soil, add some pigment, some of the scat material just for texture. I might need to add some odorless thinner. And again, using my brush and my airbrush, this is now splattered onto the side of the hole. And you can see they're combined with the lighter color. This gives us a very realistic effect. Just to get some more texture on there, I'm going to use my brush. Guys, now you see the result. I'm certainly very happy with this. Nervous moments because, as I said, there's only one chance to get this right. But I'm certainly happy with this. It's time to fit the wheels and the tracks, and for that I'm going to remove the masking I applied to these suspension arms earlier. Wheels are applied. Next up I had to fit the track band, and to be honest, this gave me a lot of headaches. This is very difficult to do, very tight fit. And yes, I used foul language and all sorts of other nasty things. However, finally I got this to fit without destroying too much of the weathering that I applied, and this is the result. You'll notice the weight of the track on the real one. This needs to be simulated, and to do this I use some cotton buds and then just glued it in place and allowed it to dry that way. This is the final result. Tracks have been fitted, wheels have been fitted, but of course the wheels look way too clean to be realistic, and that's the next step, weathering the wheels. In reference pictures, a lot of orange dust can be seen accumulated on top of these vehicles, and that's one of the next things that we'll be doing. I'll be using my glass palette insert from Red Grass Games for this as well. It works very well with pigment. And again, I'll be using my Vietnam earth pigment, a stirrer just to scoop it out, a brush, and of course some tap water. First step is to scoop some of this stuff out onto the glass insert. Next, a few drops of tap water just to mix this into a paste. Might need to keep some water close by. And this is now brushed onto the edges of the wheels. Now pay careful attention to the reference pictures. You'll notice that the dust accumulated on the outside of the rim, and so I want to keep the inside of the wheels relatively clean. Now, once the pigment has dried for a few minutes, I use a wet cotton bud and just start cleaning up the wheel. This needs to be a very subtle effect. I also apply the same wet pigment to the outside ramp along the edges. Apply more than you need initially, and then once it's dried, just start cleaning it up in a similar fashion with a wet cotton bud. In this case I also use some paper towel. Now onto the top of the vehicle. Again, working the wet pigment into all the detail, paying special attention to the driver's hatch there, making sure I get the pigment into all the little spaces between the viewing blocks. And once the pigment is dried, use a wet paper towel and start wiping off the excess. One of the last things to do is to add this metallic shine that we see in the reference pictures, and this to simulate worn metal. I'll be using gunmetal pigment from Ammo Meg. Scoop a little bit of this into the tray there. And next I'll be using a cotton bud. And load some of this up. Basically turning this into a large pencil. And also I know a lot of modelers use pencil graphite for this. I now start rubbing this onto the edges of all the metallic surfaces, and you can immediately see the effect that we get, in very realistic, paying special attention to all the areas around the driver's hatch where the paint will be worn. Also on those spare track links, top of the lights there, the cover there. Basically all the exposed metal, the edges of the side of the vehicle. Gradually build up the effect, don't be too hasty, and rather take your time, do several passes with the pigment. But this certainly gives it a very realistic look. And of course this is also one of the last things you should do once you've applied all your paint, all your other weathering, just to make sure that it looks realistic. The rear ramp gets the same treatment. I'll be doing a lot more weathering on the rear ramp later, but first we'll need to build the diorama base. So stay tuned for more on that later. Also these gun shields, they would have seen a lot of wear. Guys, and that's it. This is 99.9% of all the weathering done. I'm over the moon with this result. We're basically done with the 113 now. There's some small detailing that still needs to be done. I'll be covering that in the next video. But this is the 113, basically 99% done. I've enjoyed this so much, and looking forward to the rest of the build. Before I go, a reminder that this build is sponsored by Zululand Hobbies here in South Africa, zululandhobbies.co.za. Do check out their website, and there's always a list of all the products that I used, all the pigments and the paints. If you'd like to see how this build progresses, do follow me on Instagram. I post a lot of updates there, and I'm looking forward to seeing everyone in the next video.